Welcome to this explainer. Today our deepest, most firmly held assumptions about human relationships, love, and intimacy are about to be completely challenged. What if I told you that the way you understand relationships today is actually heavily influenced by a 600-million-year-old biological program? It's true. We tend to think of our modern social rules as just a given, right? But as we go through this, you're going to see that the complete story is so much more profound and honestly, a little more startling than we were ever taught. It's literally the ultimate question, isn't it? Why do we marry? Why do we pair off in the very specific ways that we do? Well, most of us look at this and immediately think of love. Or maybe we just assume it's basic, undeniable human biology. But here is the really surprising truth. The strict rules around relationships and exclusivity that we assume are entirely natural, they were actually invented by lawyers roughly 10,000 years ago. Yep, lawyers. They were absolutely not born out of biology. So, to understand how we actually got here, we have to look way past the lawyers, past modern civilization, and rewind the clock much, much further back.
Okay, let's dive into this. Our timeline today covers some absolutely massive ground. We're going from a biological accident 600 million years ago to communal survival, the dawn of intimacy, and finally, the invention of property law. Let's just start right at the very beginning.
Sex was invented as a survival weapon. I know, it sounds pretty stark, but 600 million years ago, sex simply didn't exist. Life just reproduced by splitting in half. Endless, boring copying. But then, thanks to literally the universe's luckiest biological typo, two single cells accidentally merged their material instead of splitting. And the resulting cell was totally different. It was more adaptable, it was way harder to kill, and it was highly unpredictable. So when the environment changed, these mixed cells survived, while the identical copies just died out. Evolution basically immediately adopted this. It spread across complex life not as a mechanism for pleasure, mind you, but strictly as a survival weapon. It created variety, and variety survived.
Fast forward to 200,000 years ago. Communal human survival on the savannah. I want you to really transport yourself to the dangerous African savanna at night. Picture this. You're part of a small group of just 12 people, all huddled around a fire. The darkness around you is absolute. And last winter, 3 people in your group didn't make it. Now, across the fire, someone catches your eye. Your heart races, your palms get warm. But what you're feeling here isn't modern romance. It's actually your body running its absolute oldest biological program. Find a strong partner, reproduce, and keep the human line alive against the darkness. As anthropologist Christopher Ryan points out, early human groups were sexually open and communal. There were multiple partners, and children were raised by the entire group. Now, this wasn't chaos. This was brilliant survival engineering. Think about it. If one man died on a hunt, another man was already bonded to those children. Every man protected every child because, well, any of them could literally be his. The whole group survived together, or they didn't survive at all.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly where we fit into the primate family tree. Let's contrast our closest primate relatives. On one side, we have gorillas. They live in strict groups with one dominant male, strict exclusivity, and basically no male competition. On the completely other side, chimpanzees live in highly open groups with immense competition and many partners. Human biology sits almost exactly in the middle of these two extremes. We just aren't built for that strict, one dominant male gorilla model. Our bodies actually physically retain the evidence of our open, communal, and highly social past.
Moving along to 100,000 years ago, the dawn of intimacy.
Here is where something massive shifted. As the human brain grew larger and infinitely more complex, it started attaching deep emotion to physical acts, and that gave birth to tenderness. For the very first time in history, biology became personal. Humans weren't just seeking any warm body for survival anymore. They started actually choosing one specific person in the dark. They started touching not just to reproduce, but to offer comfort. They stayed the morning after, just to feel something real. These were the first completely unnecessary human acts. I mean, by cold survival logic, staying close and cuddling makes zero sense. You should be out foraging or resting efficiently. But they defied that logic entirely. A massive biological shift had occurred, one that evolution never explicitly programmed for. And at this point, it didn't even have a name yet.
To prove how incredibly real this bond became, let's look at this number, 5,000. Let's fast forward a bit on our evolutionary timeline to a really stunning discovery made back in 2004. Archaeologist Elena Minotti opened a grave in Mantua, Italy. Inside, she found 2 skeletons that had been lying there for 5,000 years.
The skeletons were positioned face to face, their arms wrapped tightly around each other, foreheads almost touching. These were two people refusing to enter death apart. The archaeologist who found them was literally unable to speak. This grave proved unequivocally that the physical act of survival had evolved. It had created something biology never originally designed: deep, real love between specific, irreplaceable individuals.
Which brings us to 10,000 years ago, invented by property law.
So when humans finally stopped wandering and started planting crops, we settled down and started owning land. But this created a massive, unprecedented complication for our species. Suddenly, early humans were faced with this very stark, legal question: who gets this land when I die? It sounds like a simple administrative thing, but this single question fundamentally hijacked human intimacy forever. Think about it. To pass down land, you needed a legal answer. That legal answer required knowing your exact lineage, knowing exactly which children were yours for sure. And to guarantee that, well, you had to control who women slept with, completely and permanently.
As anthropologist Christopher Bowe argues, sexual exclusivity was basically invented by property law. The concept of one woman legally belonging to one man was entirely an economic decision. It was designed specifically to track land inheritance. Now, over time, religion made it feel sacred, and culture eventually dressed it up as morality, making it feel perfectly natural to us today. But at its root, it was purely an economic invention just to solve a property problem.
And the historical data shows that the enforcement of these property laws was, quite frankly, severe. Around 1750 BCE, laws were actually punishing women with death for non-exclusivity. Under Roman law, husbands were legally permitted to kill their wives for infractions. Yet, and here's the kicker, these exact same laws offered complete protection to men doing the exact same thing. Across nearly every civilization, this extremely strict legal double standard emerged. The root cause, as historians and anthropologists note, traces back directly to land inheritance. Control of the relationship was, legally speaking, entirely about the control of property.
Now let's look at the oldest human truth: the unchanging pull.
So civilization built these rigid, heavily enforced laws to control inheritance. But as we move into the final part of our explainer, we're going to look at the one profound thing that all the harsh laws of civilization could never actually touch, legislate, or destroy. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the number 40. Against all odds, an ancient Neanderthal skeleton found in the Shenadar cave in Iraq lived to be 40 years old, which was a pretty remarkable age for someone living in that brutal era. But his age isn't even the most fascinating part of this discovery.
Let's look at the actual condition of his skeleton. He had a withered right arm from childhood. He suffered from partial blindness. He had broken bones throughout his entire body. He couldn't hunt, he couldn't gather, he couldn't protect anyone. By the cold, hard logic of survival on the savannah, he should have been left behind years earlier. But he wasn't. Someone chose to feed him, year after year. He was kept alive entirely by choice.
That evidence points to one incredibly beautiful conclusion: the pull toward one specific person. Someone chose to care for him. Not because a property law required it, not because an inheritance demanded it. They cared for him simply because they chose him. This undeniable pull toward a specific laugh, a specific warmth, existed way before any laws, cities, or religions were ever written down. It is a biological truth of intimacy that your body still carries inside it right now.
So much of what we assume is just natural was actually legislated into existence. But underneath all of that, 600 million years of evolution has built a deeply ingrained capacity for genuine, specific connection. So I'll leave you with this thought. If all the laws, rules, and societal expectations were completely stripped away tomorrow, who is the specific person you would choose in the dark? Think about that ancient, unbroken biological pull. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning what you think you know.